Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab for today's workshop. If you have any questions along the way for our presenter, you can type them into the GoToWebinar chat box, likely on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any tech questions, you can also type them there. We will be sending out the recording and materials from today's workshop by the end of the day tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that email. And without further ado, I will now hand it over to you, Eric.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and greetings from beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota. I hope wherever you are starting your week with some lovely weather and lots of good things to do. We are here on a very fast journey through developing an AI policy for your nonprofit, and I'm really looking forward to spending this time together with you. As was mentioned, we'll have some time at the end to talk about questions. But we're going to start with just a quick overview of where we're at in terms of the sector and AI. Then I'm going to talk quite a bit about elements of an AI policy and things you might want to consider as you're developing your AI policies. And then we'll close with a little section on your next steps, what you can do to take today's learning into action and what you can do to actually develop whatever your next step looks like for your acceptable use policy in the world of AI. So let me see if I can get my, there we go, get my computer to cooperate and the presentation to cooperate. So I want to begin by just telling you a little bit about me and about the context that we're setting in here. I am not a lawyer, so first and foremost, you should not take any of my policy advice here as legal advice. I'm also not a technical guy. I'm not an IT person or somebody who comes at this work from IT. The focus of my work is helping nonprofits to achieve their mission. And mostly I do that through helping them develop strategic plans or marketing plans to help them do the work. And a couple of years ago, I saw somebody present on AI and it sort of blew me out of the water. I couldn't believe the power of these tools and wound up inviting the presenter to a networking coffee. And I said, Lori, how did you become an expert in AI? And she laughed and said, expert, there's no experts in AI. And I think that is largely still true. These things are changing so fast. There is so much that is going on. We are all active learners. We are all curious and trying to figure out how to use these tools effectively to achieve our mission. And so my lens as we begin this conversation is really to help you think through how can we use AI effectively within our organization to help us achieve our mission? And I think that starts with a vision around the culture we're hoping to create with the use of these tools within our organization. And what I mean by that is, when ChatGPT launched a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of trepidation in the nonprofit sector about what does this mean? Is this going to affect people's jobs? Is this an ethical use? And I think we are getting to a place where we're recognizing that these are very, very powerful tools that can help us to do the critical work we're trying to do. I would imagine everybody who's on this phone call right now, very few, if any, of the folks who are on this webinar right now got into the work that you're doing because you wanted to spend more time building spreadsheets or analyzing email campaigns or trying to craft social media posts. I would imagine you got into this work because you're passionate about the work of your organization, because you're passionate about solving the critical issue that is on your plate. And AI presents us with an opportunity to spend more time on that critical work that only you can do, work around strategy, work around building relationships, work around advocacy, and giving some of those operational tasks and those routine tasks over to the tools, to the AI tools. But in order for us to be successful about that, we have to use the tools effectively, right? We have to understand what they can and can't do. We have to understand their limitations, and we have to make sure that we are being transparent and clear about what the tools are going to do within our organization. So as we launch today's conversation, I want you to think about the culture you're trying to build within your organization to help leverage these tools to help you actually achieve your mission. The reason this conversation around policy is becoming so important right now is because a lot of nonprofits are running blind. And I've done this research a couple of times. It's very fast moving. It's changing quickly. But the most recent surveys in the spring of this year indicated that 80% of nonprofits have yet to adopt an acceptable use policy. And what that means is that our teams, our staff members, our colleagues are cobbling things together on their own. They recognize the power of these tools. They might be using them within their own personal lives and bringing that into the work environment. But we aren't always providing them with the rules of the road, and we aren't providing our teams with guidance about how effectively to use these tools. And so as we're working through today's conversation, I'd encourage you to think through, where is your organization at right now? It's possible you haven't even started this conversation. You have no policies in place. You haven't updated any of your policies. That's perfectly fine. A lot of organizations are exactly where you are. You may have started to do the work and got some emerging policies, some things in place, maybe updated a few things, but you recognize that there is also more work to be done. That's great too. Hopefully this will help inspire you to take that next step and to consider the next level of policies or acceptable use that your organization needs to face. And a few of you may have already done a lot of the heavy lifting and really have robust acceptable use policies in place. And hopefully you will help us as we get into our questions and discussion towards the end of the conversation and share your learnings about what has worked well for your organization and where there are still opportunities to grow. The other thing that I want you to think about as we're talking about these acceptable use policies and creating AI policies is that we don't always have to start from scratch. We don't always have to create one new ginormous AI acceptable use policy that's 12 pages long and that's sent out to everybody. There's a lot of this work and a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about related to AI that we may already have in for an AI violation in the same way that you would use for any other HR policy violation or any other concerns. There are some topics where we may actually need to develop entirely new policies, or we may need to rethink the existing policies or the existing acceptable use in place, and we'll spend some time talking about those as well. The reason this is so important is because without these guidelines and without policies in place, we are putting our organization at risk, okay? A lot of folks in our organization deal with a lot of data every single day. We have donor information, we have client information, we have financial information about our organization, we have our brand reputation, we have copyright issues. All of these topics wind up affecting us when we are working within the AI environment. And it's important from an organizational lens that we are providing clarity to the team, clarity to the folks who are working with these tools, so that we're not creating additional risk for the organization, and so that we're protecting our clients and our donors and our financial information to make sure something doesn't happen that we wouldn't want to have happen for all of them. We also have a really big ethical responsibility, and I think this is particularly important for those of us who are in nonprofits. We want to be thinking about who could be harmed by using some of these tools, and what unintended consequences could come about when we are using these tools. So that, again, we can provide our team with the right guidance so that we are staying true to our mission and focused on the right priorities. When I talk about this values lens here, I want to give you a couple of examples of what I mean by that, because this really can change from one organization to another organization. I was presenting earlier this summer in Wisconsin, and somebody came up after me after a presentation similar to this one, and they said, you know, Eric, our organization is really struggling to use AI because we are all about supporting artists and content creators. And we don't want to see those jobs and the work that those folks are doing displaced by technology. And so we had a really rich conversation about how for that organization, if your mission is about supporting creators and supporting designers, that organization may actually put in place more restrictions about what kinds of content or what kinds of design elements they use AI for, and may limit their AI use to more operational and financial and data analytics. It could still be of value to their organization, but parts of what the tool does may not be appropriate for their mission. Another example that that I think of when I am concerned about AI policies, we think about environmental organizations who are concerned about the power usage that AI may have. And for those organizations, they may decide that they're going to limit the use of how AI is used within their organization because that matches their mission. So all of these, all of these conversations are going to be unique to the individual mission, to your individual values, and only your organization can sort through when there's a values conflict or when there's a mission conflict. But I want to reassure you, and I want to empower you that staying true to your values and staying true to your mission is far more important than implementing the tool. So make sure that as we're talking through these policy decisions, as we're talking through this acceptable use, that you're guided by the values and the mission of your organization and making decisions that are appropriate for your organization. So let's get into the actual topics that we need to be thinking about when we're talking about acceptable use. And this is a long list. I don't want you to panic. We're doing kind of a flyover. This is a high-level review. As I'm talking through these, I encourage you to think through which of these areas might be the biggest risk or the biggest challenge for your organization. Again, different organizations may answer that question in different ways. But for right now, as I proceed through to describe each of these areas, think carefully and think in your own mind, what affects us? Does this matter to us? Is this a big deal for us or not such a big deal for us? So the first thing we need to be thinking about are the actual acceptable tools. Which AI tools does our organization condone, endorse, use? And are there any tools that we are going to say you cannot use those tools when working within our organization? This starts at a very basic level, right? Like, do people in your organization use their personal ChatGPT account to do work? And is that acceptable to you? Or does your organization have an enterprise license or an enterprise system that's already in place where you need to remind them and you need to say to the team, hey, we've got an enterprise license here. Everybody needs to do their work focused within that enterprise space. You may have decisions about which specific tools you are going to allow to be used as well. For example, some people may be deep into ChatGPT. Other folks may be leveraging the entire Windows ecosystem and Copilot and some of the power that Copilot brings, particularly connecting some of your office and your office applications, such as Word and Excel and Outlook. Whatever it is, we need as organizations to provide individuals on our team with clear directions to say yes or no. You can use ChatGPT, you can't. You can use your personal account or you can't. I would also say on the enterprise issue, and I'm not trying to sell anything here, but I would make you aware, if you weren't already aware, that usually when you buy an enterprise license for many of these tools, you're also able to access a different level of security around your data within the organization that is not always as broad as using these tools individually. In other words, if your organization purchases a ChatGPT nonprofit license, that data is treated differently than when you or I go to chatgpt.com and start answering questions. So in addition to asking these questions around what's acceptable and what's not, we may have a longer term challenge and a longer term question to ask of, Do we have enterprise software and license? And if not, what's our process to eventually get there? So that's what we're talking about with the acceptable tools area. Another big space we need to be thinking about is around accuracy bias and transparency. I'll bet if I turned on everybody's speaker right now and asked you to share with me mistakes you have seen from using these AI tools, we could probably spend the next hour laughing and being horrified at some of the ways that AI can make mistakes. It is a thing. It's a real thing, and it's a really important thing for us as organizations. So we need to start thinking about what's the process that we have in place to review the content, the data, the information, the analysis that we are leveraging from these tools. How are we making sure that the results we're getting are in fact accurate? The same thing holds true in the space of bias. Many of you were probably following along. Again, this became a real hot button at the beginning of 2024 and earlier this year. There are lots of different ways that these tools are biased. They are biased towards Western culture. They tend to be biased towards white folk. And so it is often not uncommon for us to see results that may reflect unintended bias from these tools. I frequently will ask ChatGPT to create little cartoon characters. You'll see some at the end of this. I like to do that to enliven my presentations. And sometimes I will say, show me a group of people at a conference, hanging out, at a work conference. And it is amazing to me how oftentimes I will see a cartoon that will come up and it will have 8 people gathered around and every single person is white, or every single person is wearing Western clothes. And so I have to prompt the tool to say, hey, I want this to be more diverse. I want this to represent a variety of ability levels or a variety of races in my image. So as an organization, we have to ask ourselves, how are we making sure that we're not allowing that bias to move forward into our production, onto our website, out into the world? And then finally, with this whole conversation around transparency. There are transparency concerns to be addressed in terms of when do we disclose that we're using AI? And there's also transparency around letting people know when we are leveraging some of these tools. So probably the most common example of this are meeting tools. You may already use a meeting bot that joins you in a meeting, and it is recording things, it is taking notes for you. Is that required in your organization to disclose that and to let people know, hey, I'm going to record this meeting using my AI bot. Is that okay with you? Are you comfortable with that? Longer term, we have a whole host of issues with these meeting bots. Where do those notes go? How long are those notes saved? Which meetings are recorded and which meetings aren't? So transparency can have a number of long-term questions that we eventually will have to answer as we continue to move forward down this path. For the accuracy and bias issue, the question and the process that we might want to be thinking about is, do we have proofreading? Do we have two-person proofing going on as part of our regular process, maybe even as part of our policy, to make sure that we're not allowing any mistakes to go forward again into the public or into anything that we are sharing and disseminating more broadly. The third area we need to really be thinking about is data privacy, and we've already touched on this a little bit. But depending on your organization, we all have confidential data, and we all may be wanting to dig into that data to leverage the power of AI to help us understand what's going on in our data. But we have to be very, very careful about that. And we need to give our team members clear direction as to what data can and can't be analyzed. When we go deeper, we might be in a place where we can help people create tools to analyze the data without disclosing privacy issues. In other words, we might be able to anonymize the data, or we might be able to use coding or other tools to allow us to do our data analysis without disclosing anything that's in place. But as an organization, our first step is to make sure everybody is clear as to what data can and cannot be shared with AI. Larger organizations and further on down the road may want to get to the place where they have committees or review structures in place that require individuals to review their data with another human being prior to uploading that data into the AI system to make sure that we're protecting our clients, protecting our donors, protecting our organization, and not allowing anything to move forward beyond what we have already agreed to within our policy. So data privacy becomes an issue for us to explore as well. We have misuse and accountability. What happens if somebody's using these tools inappropriately? What if we notice somebody on our team, and do we have a process in place to identify that, to investigate that? Where does this fall within our broader HR policy violations, et cetera? This is not an area of expertise of mine, but it is something, unfortunately, we do have to think about. And as I mentioned earlier, this may be an area where we can leverage our existing tools and our existing policies and just be crystal clear with the team. Hey, remember, all of our existing information policies still apply, and all of our accountability, our investigation, our potential sanctions, all of those will follow the same process that we have in place. Just because it happened on AI doesn't mean that it's a completely different process that we're going to follow. But we have to think through that and make sure that that's actually the way we're going to approach this. And if there are circumstances where we need different accountabilities or different reporting structures, we need to identify those and begin to develop the process that we want to see for any misuse of AI. And finally, of course, we have training and learning. So how do we disseminate all of this information? One of the things that I think when we talk about policies and when we talk about acceptable use, we can sometimes go directly into the details, go directly into the complications without recognizing the basic processes that we have available to us. So let me give you an example. We may not need to do anything around data privacy other than send an email out to remind people that our existing data privacy policy is in place. And we need to treat AI exactly the same way as we do any other tools. And so that training and learning, it may simply be an email or a communication from our executive director that reminds people of the existing policies and procedures that are in place. That in and of itself provides them again with clear direction, clear rules of the road. Everybody knows what's acceptable and what's not. For those your policies and for more advanced things, we may need to spend some time developing those. And then when the time comes, doing some rollout to provide the training and education to our team so they understand the new policies and the new processes that we're going to be launching related to AI. So all of these realms here are things that we need to be considering. And hopefully you're not, panicking, as I said, right at the moment. This is a high-level overview, but think for a moment right now about these areas and ask yourself, which of these am I most worried about for my organization? Which of these is the most concerning? Is it the data privacy? Is it accuracy? Whatever it is, that can be your first step towards developing the right tools. So one pathway forward, you might want to take a look at some of the frameworks that are available online. I've got a link at the end of this presentation that will connect you to several of these frameworks. I like the frameworks because they help us to identify areas we might not think about. We can start the conversation with webinars like this, as well as within our team and our board members. And as I've mentioned, I think throughout all of this process, we can take a look at our current policies and see which of the current policies already apply. And by the way, this is a great use of AI. You can take your policy manual, feed it into a tool like ChatGPT and say, where are there gaps here that I need to be thinking about from an AI perspective or an acceptable use perspective? So here's the challenge. What is your biggest organizational risk right now? And think about what you can do as one immediate next step to begin to bring that risk under control, to begin to reduce the risk to your organization. And then as you move forward, you can begin thinking about how you integrate AI into all of your ongoing practices and your annual policy reviews. We don't want this always to be a standalone process. We want to integrate it as much as we possibly can with our existing practices without making more work for us. Remember, as you're doing this work, you have an incredible support network. You've got your internal team, you've got some champions on board there. You have your board itself. Everybody on your board is wrestling with this in their work environment as well. You have your IT team, whether that's in-house or external. You have peer nonprofits and organizations like this and webinars and your sector networks and conferences to go to. You have your legal advice, wherever that comes from. And as I just mentioned, you have AI itself, which can help you to identify where you might need to go next. Here is a QR code. I'll also put this in the chat, a QR code that will take you to the frameworks that I mentioned that might be valuable to you. And with that, I think we're ready for some quick questions.
All right, we've got a question asking, who should be leading this policy creation at an organization?
I think that depends a little bit on your organization. Oftentimes it's the executive director and or the board. This is a governance issue, so I think it's important that you engage your board at some point. If you need a broader, like if you're really looking at all of those elements that I talked about, I would consider developing a task force that is cross-functional. Ultimately, for most organizations, I would see this as the executive director leading the charge and engaging the folks who are using it, IT and the board along the way.
Okay, we've got a question asking, can you put that link to the frameworks in the chat or show the QR code again?
I'm sorry?
Someone is asking, can you put that link to the frameworks in the chat or can you show the QR
Yes.
code again?
Absolutely. I'm going to put it in the chat right now. Thank you for the reminder. Oh, nope, that didn't go. Let's do. Okay, let's go back. Let's do it that way.
All right, and now when AI is being integrated into almost all technology tools we're already using without our consent, how would you approach applying a policy to that conundrum?
I'm not fully sure I'm tracking on all of this. I would simply say that I think it is important for us as we are negotiating vendors and working with selecting which AI tools we are going to support and not support, that we are clear on some of their ethics, clear on some of their data sharing, clear on how they're going to use our data, which data do they have access to and which data they don't have access to. So I think this gets to that first realm of acceptable use, right? We as an organization need to identify, let's use a meeting assistant as an example. You know, we sanction the use of these 1 or 2 or no meeting tools because we have vetted them and because we know they're going to use our data responsibly. And by the way, these other meeting tools, those are not permitted because we haven't vetted them and we don't trust that they're going to use our data appropriately. So I think the most important aspect of how AI is infiltrating things is on the front end and making sure that we as an organization are clear with our vendors or the software providers that we are using about how they are using our data and that we are clear on that.
All right, we got time for one more.
Yeah.
Is there a way to direct external consultants on acceptable AI use as it relates to the work they're doing for us? Or should we be asking for their AI policy?
I think both are perfectly acceptable. So if you are engaging consultants and you think they might be using AI, I think it is very appropriate for you to say, particularly before the project begins, to outline within the project contract what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, where that data is going to go, how they can use that data. And a first step might be to ask them, what is your, how do you anticipate, do you have an AI policy? How do you anticipate using this data? Please disclose that to us. And if they don't have one, then I think it's appropriate for you to say, well, we need to include that as a clause within our contract. So everybody, again, has clear rules of the road.
All right, thank you so much, Eric. This workshop has come to a close. If you are interested in receiving the recording and materials from today's workshop, you can download them on the bottom of our free webinar page or email us at program@nonprofitlearninglab.org. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Eric, for educating our community.
Thanks, everybody.